In the heart of the bustling town of Mombasa, a young couple, Chidi and Amina, had spent years battling a silent struggle that nobody knew. Married for 7 years, they had longed for a child, but every attempt seemed to end in heartbreak. Despite visiting countless hospitals and clinics and undergoing numerous tests, doctors had told them the same thing: they were perfectly healthy. Chidi, a hard-working engineer, and Amina, a devoted school teacher, couldn't understand why the blessings of parenthood continued to elude them. They tried traditional remedies, herbs, prayers, and even consulting with the town's elderly women who claimed to have knowledge passed down through generations, but nothing worked. The walls of their homes, once filled with laughter and dreams of a future together, had grown quiet, the silence only broken by the occasional sound of Amina's soft sighs as she stared longingly at the empty nursery they had prepared for the child that never came. The silence in their home grew unbearable, and with each passing day, frustration crept deeper into Chidi's heart. He couldn't understand why it wasn't happening. Amina remained patient, hopeful that one day their prayers would be answered. But for Chidi, patience had run out. Chidi had begun spending more time away from home, using work as an excuse to escape the tension. At the office, he found solace in the presence of a young woman, an attractive colleague who seemed to understand him in a way that Amina no longer did. It started with small talks, brief exchanges that turned into secret meetings. Then one evening, everything changed. The woman revealed she was pregnant and the child was his. For the first time in years, Chidi felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was the answer he had been looking for all along, a chance to finally be a father. But his relief was short-lived. Zara didn't want to be a secret in Chidi's life. She wanted to be his second wife, and she wasn't shy about making her demands. She insisted that Chidi take her back to her family, announce their relationship to everyone, and marry her properly. Chidi, though overwhelmed with guilt and the fear of being caught, refused. The last thing he wanted was to complicate his already strained marriage. He told Zara that the affair needed to stay hidden for now, just until the baby was born, and then they could figure things out. But Zara, driven by a sense of entitlement, wasn't satisfied with keeping things in the shadows. At 7 months pregnant, Zara went into labor unexpectedly. The situation escalated quickly, and despite her efforts and the help of medical staff, her child was stillborn. The grief was unbearable. Zara was devastated, completely broken by the loss. She couldn't understand how something so tragic could happen, especially after all the hopes and dreams she had placed in this child. Chidi, though equally affected by the loss, did his best to console her. He stayed by her side, offering what comfort he could. But no matter what he said or did, it never seemed enough. Zara's pain was consuming, and no words could suit it. She looked at Chidi, and it felt as if he was still a stranger, someone who couldn't truly understand the depth of her heartbreak. A week passed since the loss, and as much as Chidi wanted to be there for Zara, his focus was slowly shifting. The guilt weighed in on him, and not in a way Zara expected. His thoughts drifted back to Amina, his wife, and the life they once dreamed of. Chidi couldn't keep up with the charade any longer, despite the connection he had felt with Zara. It was clear that his heart belonged to Amina, so with a heavy heart, he told Zara it was time to end the affair. He told her that he needed to concentrate on his wife and family. His voice was firm but apologetic, though Zara couldn't see past her own pain. "I can't do this anymore," Chidi said, his words blunt and final. "I'm sorry, but I have to go back to my wife Amina. I've made a mistake and I can't keep this going." Zara's world shattered. Rage and heartbreak coursed through her veins, and her mind spun out of control. How could he just walk away like that after everything they had shared? Her pain turned to fury, and she began to form a story in her mind, a story where Chidi was responsible for the death of her child. She convinced herself that he had used her, manipulated her, and cursed the miscarriage so that he could return to his wife, the woman he had truly wanted all along. In Zara's broken mind, Chidi wasn't just a man who had been unfaithful. He was a selfish, heartless man who had chosen his own desires over the life of a child they had both created. Back home, Amina was still holding on to hope. Despite the long years of struggle, she never lost faith that one day she would have a child. She filled her days with small rituals, praying in the quiet hours of the morning, lighting candles in her modest home, and asking the ancestors for the blessing of a child. She continued to care for Chidi with love, unaware of the secret life he had been leading. Just a few weeks after Zara's devastating loss, Amina's prayers were finally answered in a way she never expected. She discovered she was pregnant. The news was like a miracle, a light in the darkness. Overwhelmed with joy, Amina shared the news with her husband Chidi, who was elated and hugged Amina so tightly that finally they would both be parents after such long years of waiting. Amina carried her pregnancy with a grace that seemed to defy the struggles she had faced in the past. Unlike other women who had suffered through the aches and pains of pregnancy, Amina experienced little discomfort. She glowed with a sense, peaceful beauty, and it felt as if the universe had finally smiled upon her. Her faith, her patience, and her perseverance had led her to this moment, and every step she took seemed lighter. When she finally came, Amina gave birth to a healthy bouncing baby boy. His cries filled the room, and in that moment the world seemed to pause. The years of longing, pain, and unanswered prayers were forgotten, replaced by the overwhelming joy of holding their son in their arms. The baby's tiny fingers grasped Chidi's hand, and he felt a deep connection. This was their child, the one they had dreamed of for so long. Amina, her face radiating with pure happiness, looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "We finally have our baby." It was a moment of pure joy, a moment that seemed to erase all the sorrow that had lingered in their homes for years. A week after the birth of their son, Chidi and Amina decided to celebrate the arrival of their long-awaited child with a grand naming ceremony. The entire town of Mombasa gathered to celebrate with them. The air was filled with excitement, laughter, and music as friends, family, and elders came closer to bless the baby boy, bestowing upon him a name that carried the weight of generations of hope. Amina, radiant and filled with love for her child, held him close as she greeted guests, her heart swelling with pride. Chidi was beaming with happiness, stood beside her, grateful that they could finally share the moments of bliss with their community. The village elders performed traditional rites, offering blessings to the baby and ensuring that he would grow up strong and healthy. But among the crowd, there was one person who wasn't celebrating. Zara, who had been quietly observing from a distance, felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She had heard rumors, whispers among the villagers, but she hadn't truly believed them until now. Zara's heart boiled with rage as the jealousy consumed her. The baby, the life that Amina and Chidi had created together, was a slap in the face to everything Zara had hoped for. She had carried his child only to lose it, and now here was Amina, standing tall with the child Zara had wanted so desperately. The sight of them together, their happiness so complete, was too much for Zara to bear. At that moment, Zara made a decision. She would make Chidi regret his actions. She would show him the consequences of what he had done, and tear apart the happiness he had built with Amina. She decided to visit Amina at her home, under the guise of celebrating the birth of the child, and offering a token of good luck. Zara's mind was sharp, calculating. She knew just what to do. When she arrived at Amina's house, Zara's smile was kind, but her eyes glinted with malice beneath the surface. She presented Amina with a beautifully crafted wristband, woven with vibrant threads of gold, red and blue. "This is for your son," Zara said swiftly, holding out the gift. "It's a bracelet that will bring him luck and prosperity as he grows. Make sure he wears it always and it will protect him." Amina, in her innocent joy, was touched by the gesture. The wristband was undeniably beautiful, its colors bright and striking. It seemed like something precious, something meant for a child for greatness. Zara spoke with such sincerity that Amina had no reason to doubt her intentions. "You must wear it on him every day," Zara continued, her voice sweet and coaxing. "It's a gift of protection and of fortune. A mother would do well to give it to her child." Zara's eyes lingered on Amina's face, watching for any sign of hesitation. But Amina only smiled and thanked her. grateful for the thoughtful gesture. As Zara turned to leave, she could almost feel the weight of her victory. Soon, many others came to visit Amina, each bringing their own gift to celebrate the birth of the baby. It was a joyous occasion full of smiles and blessings, but the wristband with its vibrant colors and intricate design caught the attention of every visitor. It was beautiful, eye-catching, and everyone who saw it complimented Amina on how lovely it was. Such a stunning bracelet. One visitor remarked, "It looks so expensive, like something special." Another woman added, "Your son will grow up lucky with such a gift." The compliments made Amina feel proud, and the more people praised the wristband, the more she felt it was a meaningful token. Amina, swept up in the praise and the joy of the day, decided to leave the wristband on her son. She gently placed it around his tiny wrist, admiring its beauty. A few months after the joyous naming ceremony, Amina and Chidi's lives took a dark turn. Their son, whom they had prayed for so long, began to show signs of severe illness. It started subtly. He wouldn't eat well, often refusing his food and crying in discomfort. But as days passed, the symptoms worsened. The child, whom they had named Emeka, became increasingly weak, unable to thrive in the way a healthy baby should. When it came time for Emeka to start crawling, he couldn't. His limbs seemed too weak and his body too stiff. Amina and Chidi, heartbroken, tried to encourage him, hoping it was just a phase. But weeks passed and Emeka remained immobile, lying in his crib with his eyes vacant and dull. When it was time for him to try standing, he simply couldn't. His legs wouldn't support him. Instead of growing stronger and developing normally, Emeka looked more like an imbecile. He could only lie on his back, saliva dripping from his mouth as he stared vacantly at the ceiling. Chidi and Amina took their son to multiple hospitals, hoping for an answer, any answer to explain what was happening. But the doctors simply couldn't understand or find anything physically wrong with Emeka. His test came back normal. The doctors were baffled, saying there was no medical reason for his condition. Desperate, they sought help from spiritual homes, consulting with local healers and spiritual leaders, but they couldn't even find a solution. No one could explain the child's suffering, and no one could help him. As the weeks turned into months, Amina and Chidi watched helplessly as their son's condition deteriorated. They spent all their saving trying to find a cure, but nothing worked. Their once hopeful life had spiraled into a constant battle for survival. Even the simplest things, as feeding themselves and paying bills, getting by became impossible. Chidi found himself working long hours, yet it wasn't enough to cover the mounting cost of medical visits and the increasing demands of life. People began to say that their son Emeka was an evil child, and that something was wrong with him, that perhaps he was cursed. The worst part was the way even their friends and family began to avoid the baby. No one wanted to hold him or touch him, or even be near him. Amina, once full of hope, now carried a deep sadness in her eyes. She looked at her son every day, wondering what could have gone wrong, but not knowing where to turn to. Chidi too struggled, his eyes and heart heavy with guilt. He couldn't understand why this was happening to their family. They had done everything, but still there was no cure or way of saving their son. By the time Emeka turned 11 months old, life for Amina and Chidi had become nearly unbearable. They had tried everything to save their son, but with each passing day, things only seemed to get worse. The hospitals, the spiritual leaders, the long sleepless nights, and all of it had drained them. Both financially and emotionally, their savings were long gone, and now in desperation, they began selling off anything of value they had left. Jewelry that had once been a gift from Chidi, cherished family heirlooms, even items of sentimental value, everything was put up for sale in order to scrape by. One evening, as Amina was cleaning her son, gently wiping his face and adjusting his tiny clothes, she noticed something. The bracelet Zara had given Emeka, the one that had been admired by so many during the naming ceremony, was still around his wrist. It shimmered softly in the dim light. Without another thought, Amina carefully removed the bracelet from Emeka's tiny wrist. She stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into the small pile of things they planned to sell the next day. The next morning, Amina and Chidi awoke to a silence that had become all too familiar. The son, Emeka, lay in his crib motionless as usual. But as Amina moved towards him to check on him, she noticed something different, something she hadn't seen in months. Emeka, for the first time in a long while, was moving. At first, Amina thought her eyes were deceiving her, but when she looked closer, she realized her son was actually making sounds, little calls and noises that were almost like baby talk, as if he was finally trying to communicate. Chidi, who had been sitting quietly by the window, caught sight of the sudden movement. He rushed over, his eyes wide with astonishment. "Amina," he whispered, his voice shaking. "He is moving. He's really moving." The following week, with their hopes still high from Emeka's unexpected improvement, Amina and Chidi took their son to the hospital for a checkup. After they had sold the wristband and other valuables the previous week to raise money for the trip. When they arrived at the hospital, Chidi held Emeka close, and Amina's eyes were full of anticipation. They had been through so much already, but now, with Emeka showing signs of improvement, they thought maybe, just maybe, the doctor would confirm that their son was on the mend. After a thorough examination, the doctor sat them down with a calm expression. "Well, there is no sign of anything physically wrong with your son," he said, his voice reassuring but neutral. "His vital signs are good and his development seems on track now. I would recommend some supplements to help with his strength and development, but I don't see anything that indicates a serious health issue. It might just have been slow start for him, but it looks like he's improving now." A week after the visit to the hospital, Amina and Chidi couldn't believe their eyes. Emeka, their son, whom they had feared would never crawl, let alone stand, had taken his first step. It was as if the moment he stepped forward, a wave of energy surged through him. He wobbled at first, barely managing to keep his balance, but then he took another step, and then another, before collapsing into his mother's arms in joy. Amina gasped in disbelief, holding him close as tears welled up in her eyes. "Chidi, he's walking," she exclaimed, her voice filled with astonishment. Chidi too couldn't hold back his excitement. He knelt beside Amina and Emeka, his heart swelling with pride. Their son, who had been so weak and inactive months ago, was now growing stronger by the day. Emeka's movements became more coordinated, his little hands grabbing at toys, his legs trying to stand and walk without hesitation. It was nothing short of a miracle. Chidi too found his life improving in ways he never expected. He had been struggling to find stable work, barely scraping by, but now, just weeks after Emeka's recovery began, Chidi was offered a new job. It was a well-paying position, one that would offer him the stability he had been craving for so long. The weight of financial strain that had plagued them for months began to lift, and for the first time in a long while, Chidi felt a sense of relief. But as life began to improve for Chidi and Amina, news of Zara reached him in a way he hadn't expected. One of his fellow colleagues said, "You haven't heard, have you?" The colleague asked. Chidi frowned, unsure of what the man was talking about. "What's going on?" he asked. "Zara, she passed away," the colleague said. "It's strange. She had some kind of illness. Boils started appearing all over her body, and it just deteriorated from there. She died not long ago. Nobody really knew what happened. It was quick. They said it was some kind of infection." Chidi felt a cold chill run down his spine. Zara's death hit him harder than he expected. He hadn't thought about her in months, but hearing about her passing stirred up old feelings, guilt and confusion. Hearing of her strange and untimely death, he couldn't escape the feeling that somehow his actions had played a part in it. The affair he had had with Zara never came to light. It remained a secret between him and the woman he had once been involved with. Amina had never known about it, and he had vowed never to tell her. Chidi, now with a stable job and the weight of his past slowly lifting, decided it was time for a change, a fresh start for his family. He felt that moving out of Mombasa, away from the memories that still lingered there, would give him the opportunity to build a new life, free from the shadows of their past struggles. The new town was a quiet, peaceful place, a little far from the bustling city of Mombasa. It felt like the perfect place to escape the pressures that had weighed them down for too long. Within less than a month of relocating, something miraculous happened. Amina discovered she was pregnant again. The joy and excitement that filled their hearts were indescribable. After everything they had gone through with Emeka, the thought of having another child was a dream come true. They decided to throw a grand celebration for Emeka's first birthday, a joyous occasion that brought together new friends and old acquaintances from the town. But the surprises didn't stop there. Amina's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and when the day of her delivery finally arrived, she gave birth to not one, but 2 healthy babies, twins, a boy and a girl. The joy that filled the room was overwhelming. Emeka, now the older sibling, seemed to understand that something special had happened, as he gazed with wonder at his new brother and sister, Amina and Chidi, both in awe of the miracle they had just witnessed, looked at their twins and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Thank you for watching this incredible story. If you enjoyed the journey of Chidi, Amina and their family, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our channel for more captivating African folktales and life lessons. Your support helps us bring these stories to life, and we love hearing from you. Share your thoughts below. What did you think of the story? What lessons stood out to you? Stay tuned for more adventures, and we'll see you in the next video.